We have some more good news coming from California. We've had this weird double standard when it comes to prosecuting people who have been caught with crack cocaine versus powdered cocaine. Now, it's essentially the same drug, it's just cooked differently. With crack cocaine, it's cooked with baking soda, and it's not necessarily stronger than real cocaine, or powdered cocaine, I should say. But nonetheless, since the black community was more likely to be caught with crack cocaine, there were harsher penalties for them. Okay, so it was a very racist law in the state of California that has now been overturned. So let me tell you exactly how this went down. The California Fair Sentencing Act, signed by Governor Jerry Brown late on Sunday evening, ensures that people who are convicted of certain offenses involving crack cocaine will no longer receive harsher punishments than people found guilty of the same crimes involving the powder form of the drug. The change comes 4 years after President Barack Obama signed a bipartisan law that reduced but did not eliminate the sentencing disparity between crack and powder cocaine on the federal level. So it's kind of sad that it took 4 years for California to act after the federal law was changed. But just to get into the nitty-gritty of exactly how this will go down, before, if you were caught with crack cocaine, you had no chance of probation. You had to serve time behind bars.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Now you have the potential of serving probation, and your sentence is not going to, or if you have like a mandatory sentence, it doesn't have to be longer than it would be with powdered cocaine. So with powdered cocaine, it was 2 years. With crack cocaine, it was 3 years. And now the sentencing will be the same for both.
Okay, now, luckily in this case, California has gone farther than federal law and say it should be the same.
Right.
So Obama reduced the disparity at the federal level, but did not eliminate it. So it's still worse at the federal level. Obviously, this is a problem across the country, including at the federal level, as we've been talking about here. But in California, so you understand why race is an issue here, almost no one arrested for crack was anything, was white, was anything other than a minority.
Right.
Okay. So now, on the other hand, white people get busted for cocaine all the time, right? So, like, for example, everybody knows on Wall Street it was legendary that they took ample amounts of cocaine, and it wasn't like that's a thing of the past. A lot of them still do. So these are not accidents. It's not, and I have to admit that when I was younger, I bought into the story about how crack was the most addictive drug ever. Newsweek ran a big cover story about it, and I had heard all these like stories about, oh, you take one hit of crack, you're gone, your brain melts and explodes, and you're addicted forever and stuff. So now I don't know exactly how it's cooked and if it actually is in any way more addictive than cocaine.
It is not.
So they've done a lot of studies on that,
right,
and generally found that it is not, right? So. But it's amazing the mythology that they built up and the propaganda they did.
Yep.
So, and think about it. Somebody knew they weren't. It's not like there was a wrong study in the beginning that led people astray. They made a conscious decision, hey, let's make sure the drug that white people are taking, you don't get punished that much for it. The drug that black people are taking, even though we know, the public might not know, but we know are the same,
yep,
okay, they get put away for a lot longer. And then let's do a propaganda campaign to convince everybody that crack is so much worse than cocaine.
I mean, if you look at the history of our drug laws, there's always race involved, right? When it comes to opium, we started criminalizing opium because Chinese immigrants were using it, and we wanted to basically criminalize them and put them behind bars. When it comes to marijuana, we started using marijuana laws, or prohibiting marijuana, because we wanted to start incarcerating Latin Americans, I should be specific. And it's amazing how big of a role the mainstream press played in the fear-mongering behind these drug laws, okay? So let me give you one specific example that was mentioned by the Huffington Post. Really great example. In 1986, Newsweek did a story, a feature on crack cocaine, and they titled it, "The Most Addictive Drug Known to Man," okay? That's an assertion that has since been rejected by many scientists.
And of course, there was reefer madness before that,
yeah,
and literally, it didn't used to be called marijuana. They changed the name to marijuana because they wanted to sound more Spanish.
Yeah.
So, and at that point, everybody was smoking it here in the country already, but it was being brought in from Mexico a lot. So they said, okay, there's a good opportunity because we don't like these immigrants,
right, to
bust the immigrants, and we'll say it's because of this pot. Oh, and instead of hemp, let's call it marijuana. Okay, and as you explained, same with opium and the Chinese. So the funny thing is, if you tell people that, I bet you a great number of white folks It's not to blame them. It's just we've all been brainwashed this way. I believed the Newsweek column. I believed the whole thing about myth about crack for all this time, right? I think most people will say, no, come on, that's a conspiracy theory. But it's not. It's actually what happened, right?
Yeah.
And when you read stuff like that, you start to worry that some of the African American scholars that are now talking about this, the drug laws, is that it was to, in a way, reconstitute, not slavery necessarily, but to say, hey, you know what? We're going to get these black folks under control. And we couldn't do it because they passed the civil rights laws, and we couldn't do it in the old ways, so we're going to find a new way.
Yeah,
we're just going to criminalize what they do, what they already do, what we already do.
Right.
And we're going to give disparate treatment in that criminalization process, right? So we're going to let these guys off, and we're going to overly punish these guys. And look at that, they're back in chains.
I know. I mean, look, if you want a perfect example of that, look at the statistics behind marijuana. Black individuals and white individuals use it at the same rate. But when it comes to incarceration, prosecution, all of that, black people are incarcerated at a far higher rate compared to white people.
Generally about 4 times higher rate.
Yeah.
Sometimes far greater than that, depending on the city or state that you're in.
Exactly.
Okay, I mean, it is clearly and factually disparate treatment. And then you wonder, for the people who built the propaganda campaigns, that's not an accident, they did it on purpose. So what was their intention?